Michael Harris had always found comfort in the quiet. It had been years since the tragic death of his wife, Emily, and since then he had built a life around solitude. He was a man of routine, a man who found peace in the small, predictable things. Every morning he opened the bookstore that he had inherited from his late uncle, an old creaky building nestled on the corner of Maple Street. The shelves, stacked high with books of every kind, provided a sense of purpose, a distraction from the aching void inside him. But no matter how many books he read or how many customers came in and out, nothing could fill the emptiness Emily had left behind. It had been 10 years since the accident, 10 long years since the world as Michael knew it shattered. Emily had died suddenly, a tragic event that nobody had expected. A car crash, the kind of thing that seemed to happen to other people, not to them. They had been happy, in love. Life had felt like it was just beginning. And then, in the blink of an eye, it was over. Michael had buried Emily in the small cemetery on the edge of town. The ceremony had been quiet, intimate, just a few friends and family members who couldn't bear to leave him alone. Everyone tried to comfort him, but Michael could feel the distance between him and the world. Grief had settled over him like a thick fog, and he couldn't find his way out. Years had passed since that day, but Michael's heart had never fully healed. He never truly moved on. There were moments when he thought he was doing better, when the pain wasn't as sharp, when he could smile at a joke or talk to a friend without feeling like his world was falling apart again. But every night when he closed his eyes, he could still see Emily's face, hear her laugh, feel her hand in his. And every morning when he woke up, the reality of her absence would hit him all over again. The bookstore had become his refuge, a place where time seemed to slow down. He knew its corners like the back of his hand, the creaky floorboards, the smell of old paper and leather. It was quiet, just the way he liked it. There were a few regular customers, mostly older folks who came in to browse for a while before heading to the local cafe for their daily cup of coffee. Michael didn't mind the company. It was a pleasant distraction, and they often talked about books, about life, about anything that didn't remind him of the past. One afternoon, as Michael was shelving a stack of newly arrived novels, a soft chime sounded above the door. He turned around to see a woman standing in the doorway, a stranger. She was holding a letter in her hand, her face an unreadable mask. There was something about her that immediately caught Michael's attention. Perhaps it was the strange sadness in her eyes, or the way she stood as if she had something important to say, but didn't know how to say it. "Can I help you?" Michael asked, wiping his hands on his apron. The woman stepped forward, her shoes clicking softly against the wooden floor. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "I have something for you." "A letter?" Michael's brow furrowed. "A letter for me?" "Yes," she replied, holding it out to him. "It's from someone you once knew." He took the envelope from her hand, his fingers brushing against hers for just a moment. The envelope was unremarkable, plain white with a simple address written in black ink. His name, Michael Harris, was written on the front. But what caught his attention was the handwriting. It was familiar. It was Emily's handwriting. His heart skipped a beat. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice a little shakier than he intended. He didn't know why, but he suddenly felt a cold sweat break out on the back of his neck. He had to force himself to stay calm, to think logically. The woman hesitated as though unsure how much to reveal. "I was told to give it to you," she said slowly. "I don't know all the details. I just know it's for you." Michael stared at the letter in his hands, his mind racing. This couldn't be real. Emily had been dead for 10 years. He had buried her. He had watched as they lowered her casket into the ground. He had grieved. He had mourned. He had let her go. So why would she be sending him a letter now? The woman seemed to sense his confusion, and she stepped back slightly, giving him space. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I know it's unexpected, but I have to go. I hope you find the answers you're looking for." Before Michael could say anything, the woman turned and left the bookstore, disappearing into the street outside. Michael stood there, staring at the door, still holding the letter. His hands felt clammy, his breath coming in shallow bursts. What was going on? Who was this woman? And why had she given him a letter that seemed to come from the past? He opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sheet of paper folded neatly. The handwriting on it was unmistakable. It was Emily's. "My dearest Michael, I'm sorry for all the pain I've caused you, but there's something you need to know. I've been gone for so long and I never wanted you to suffer. But now things are different. I need you to understand why I had to leave. Please forgive me. Michael's heart pounded in his chest. He could barely breathe as his eyes skimmed over the words. The letter went on to explain things he had never expected to hear. Secrets, things about Emily's life that she had never told him. It mentioned a decision she had made, a choice she had kept hidden, a choice that had led to her disappearance. The letter ended with a final chilling sentence. I am alive, Michael. And I need your help. Michael sat down heavily in one of the chairs by the window, his mind racing. His heart felt like it was going to burst out of his chest. Emily alive? It was impossible. He had seen her body. He had been there when they buried her. This couldn't be real, but the letter was real. He could feel it. He could feel her presence in every word. He was left with more questions than answers. Why had Emily faked her death? What had happened to her? And why had she waited so long to reach out to him? Michael couldn't sit idle. He had to know the truth. He had to find Emily, no matter what it took. Michael sat in the bookstore, the letter trembling in his hands, his heart racing faster with every word he read. The room, usually so comforting with its shelves of books and the smell of old paper, suddenly felt much too small. He looked around as if the answer would jump out from one of the dusty corners, but everything was still. Silent. He read the letter again. Emily's words were as clear as the day they were written, but they made no sense. How could she be alive? He had watched her funeral, grieved for her with every part of his being, and buried her with his own hands. He had been so sure she was gone forever. How could she possibly be out there somewhere, living a different life? And more importantly, why hadn't she contacted him sooner? A deep ache settled in Michael's chest. He thought back to the day of the accident, the phone call that changed everything. Emily had been out for a drive, one of her frequent trips to clear her head. Michael had always found it strange how much she needed to be alone sometimes, even though they shared nearly every part of their lives together. She said it was her way of reconnecting with herself, a way to find peace before she returned to him. He never thought twice about it. That afternoon she had left the house with a smile and a promise to be back soon. But then came the call from the police. Michael shook his head, trying to clear the memory, but the pain still lingered. He had gotten in the car and rushed to the scene, hoping, praying that it was a mistake. But it wasn't. Emily was gone. They told him it was a freak accident. The car had gone off the road and she didn't survive. There were no survivors. He could still hear the crackling of the officer's voice as he spoke the words that would haunt him forever. That was the moment when his world had turned black. After the funeral, Michael couldn't even bring himself to go back to their house. The thought of being surrounded by the memories of Emily, of everything they had shared, was too much to bear. He moved to the bookstore and buried himself in the world of books, where he could lose himself in stories of other lives, other worlds, other loves. It wasn't the same, of course. Nothing could be the same. But it was enough to keep the ache at bay, just enough for him to keep breathing. And now here he was, holding a letter from Emily, written by her own hand. Signed with her name, alive, he whispered, his voice cracking as the word escaped him. His mind swirled with 1,000 questions, each one more impossible than the last. How had she managed to disappear without a trace? Why had she kept it from him all these years? And if she was really alive, what had happened to her? Was she in danger? Was there something he needed to know? Something that had been hidden from him all this time? Michael couldn't sit still any longer. He had to find answers. He had to know the truth. Grabbing his coat and the letter, he left the bookstore. The late afternoon sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the streets. Michael walked down the familiar sidewalks, his mind still reeling. He hadn't even decided where he was going, but somehow his feet carried him to the local cafe, the place where he and Emily had often gone for coffee on lazy Sunday mornings. The bell above the door jingled as he stepped inside, and the warm scent of coffee beans and baked goods filled the air. It was a cozy little place with mismatched tables and a chalkboard menu that changed with the seasons. But it felt different today. The usual hum of quiet conversation seemed distant, as if the world around him was out of focus. He needed answers, and none of this felt real. He walked up to the counter where Marie, the barista, gave him a friendly smile. Marie had been working at the cafe for years, always with a bright smile and a warm greeting. She had been there when he and Emily used to visit together, sitting in the corner booth laughing over coffee. "Hey, Michael, what can I get for you?" she asked, her voice light and cheerful. But Michael noticed the concern in her eyes. "I'm fine, just need a moment," he said, still holding the letter in his hand. Marie gave him a nod, sensing that something was off. "Take your time," she said, and he turned away from the counter, heading to the back of the cafe where a small seating area was tucked away. He sat down, spreading the letter out on the table in front of him, his fingers tracing the familiar curves of Emily's handwriting. There was something comforting about it, even though the words were now so foreign, so confusing. The letter had started innocently enough, talking about how Emily had to make a difficult choice. She had explained how she hadn't wanted to hurt him, but how the situation she found herself in had left her with no other option. She had to leave. She had to disappear. For her safety. For his. Michael's thoughts raced back to the past. What had Emily been involved in that could have made her leave? What kind of danger had she been facing? They had always been so happy together. Sure, there were the little things, secrets that she kept, moments of silence when she would disappear into her own thoughts. But he never questioned her. He never imagined she was hiding something that could have put her life in jeopardy. There was another part of the letter that Michael couldn't bring himself to read just yet. The part where she said she was alive. It felt too unreal. The idea that Emily was out there somewhere living a life he knew nothing about was almost impossible to comprehend. But the letter was proof. Proof that something was terribly wrong. Proof that the woman he had mourned for so long was not lost to him after all. He had to know. He had to understand. Michael folded the letter carefully and shoved it into his coat pocket. He couldn't keep sitting here letting the mystery eat away at him. It was time to take action. He stood up, the decision weighing heavily on him. But where would he start? Who could he trust with this? Who could help him find Emily if she was still out there? Before he could make a plan, he felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned around to find a familiar face standing behind him. Sarah, an old friend from the past. She had known Emily too and had always been a bit of a confidant for her. "Michael, what's going on?" Sarah asked, concern lining her face as she looked at him closely. "You've been acting strange lately." Michael didn't know where to start. His mind was racing with thoughts, questions, and emotions he wasn't ready to face. But seeing Sarah's familiar face gave him a strange sense of comfort, and he knew he couldn't keep this secret any longer. "Sarah, I need your help," he said, his voice quiet but urgent. Sarah pulled up a chair, sitting down across from him. "What's happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I have," Michael replied, almost too softly to hear. "Or at least, I think I have, Emily. She's alive." Michael's words hung in the air like a heavy fog. Sarah looked at him as if he had just told her that the sky was falling. She blinked a couple of times, her mouth slightly open in disbelief, and for a moment Michael wondered if he had just imagined everything, if he had somehow been dreaming or losing his mind. But no, the letter was still in his pocket. The paper crinkled from where he had held it too tightly. It was real, and Emily was alive. "Michael, you can't be serious," Sarah said slowly, her voice trembling with confusion. "You're saying Emily is alive?" "I don't know what to think," Michael replied, rubbing his forehead. "But she sent me a letter. I've read it, and it's written by her. Emily's handwriting. She says she's alive and that she needed to leave for her own safety, for mine." "But why, Sarah? Why would she leave me like that?" He looked at his friend, hoping for some clarity, some explanation, but Sarah only shook her head. She looked as lost as he felt. Michael had known Sarah for years, and she had been there for him through everything, through his grieving process, through the sleepless nights and the endless questions about Emily's sudden death. But this was something neither of them could have ever predicted. Maybe it's a mistake," Sarah suggested, though her voice lacked conviction. "I mean, Michael, you've been through so much. Grief can play tricks on your mind. Maybe this letter is just—" "No, it's not like that," Michael interrupted, his voice firm. "I know what I'm reading. I know what I felt when I held that letter in my hands. Emily's handwriting, her words. It's her, Sarah. I don't know what's going on, but I need to find out. I need to know why she did this, why she left without a word. If she's alive, then why didn't she come back for me?" Michael stood up, suddenly feeling trapped in the small cafe. The walls, once comforting, now felt like they were closing in on him. He couldn't stay here, talking in circles, wondering if this was just a cruel joke. His heart was screaming at him to act, to find answers. He had to know if Emily was really out there, if she had been hiding all this time, and if she still cared for him. "Michael, wait," Sarah said, standing up quickly and grabbing his arm. "You're not thinking clearly. What are you going to do? Just go running after her without any idea of where she is or what's going on. You could be walking into something dangerous." "I don't care," he said, his eyes hardening. "I need to find her, Sarah. I need to know if she's alive. And if she is, I need to understand why she kept me in the dark all these years. I can't keep living like this, not knowing." Sarah looked at him, and for a moment Michael could see the worry in her eyes. She knew him well. She knew that once Michael made up his mind, there was no changing it. He was determined. But even so, she couldn't shake the fear that something was off about this whole situation. Emily had been dead for so long. What if this was some kind of mistake, some kind of sick trick? What if it wasn't really Emily at all? "I'll help you," Sarah said softly after a long pause. "But we have to be careful. We need to figure out what's going on, step by step. We can't just rush in without knowing what we're dealing with." Michael nodded, his gratitude for Sarah's support washing over him. He had always trusted her, and he wasn't about to let fear or doubt stop him from uncovering the truth. If Emily was out there, he would find her, no matter the cost. They spent the next few hours going over every detail of the letter. Michael pulled it out again, reading it over and over, trying to make sense of the words. It seemed impossible, but everything about it felt real. The letter spoke of a secret, something that Emily had never told him, a secret that had forced her to disappear for her safety. She said she didn't want to hurt him, but she had no other choice. She had left him to protect him, but now, after all these years, she was reaching out. "She says something happened to her, but she doesn't explain what," Michael said, pointing to the letter. "She says she had to disappear for good, but she never says why." "Why would she leave me behind like that?" Sarah leaned over the table, studying the letter carefully. What if someone was after her? What if she had to fake her death to escape danger? Michael's heart skipped a beat. The idea made sense, but it also terrified him. "That's what I'm afraid of," he admitted. "What if she's been running all this time, hiding from someone, and now she's finally ready to tell me the truth? Then we need to figure out who's after her and why," Sarah said. "We need to start asking questions. There must be someone who knows something." Michael and Sarah spent the rest of the day making plans. They started by going to the small town where Emily had grown up, hoping to find some clues about her life before they met. Emily had always been a little secretive about her past, and Michael had never pressed her to reveal more. But now it seemed that everything was connected. The past, the accident, her disappearance, it was all tangled together in ways that Michael couldn't yet understand. The next morning, they drove to the town, a small quiet place nestled in the hills about 2 hours away. It was a peaceful town, the kind of place where everyone knew each other and nothing ever changed. Emily had grown up here, and it was where her family still lived. Michael remembered visiting them a few times when they were first dating, but after Emily's death he had lost contact with her family. It was too painful to face them, and he never knew what to say. They arrived in the town late in the afternoon, the sky turning orange as the sun began to set. The town felt familiar but distant, like stepping back in time. The same old stores lined the streets, the same houses sat on the same corners, but something felt different. There was an uneasy quiet in the air, as if the town was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Michael and Sarah drove past Emily's old house, the one she had grown up in. It was a modest place with a white picket fence and a well-kept garden. But now it looked empty. The lights were off and the windows were dark. Michael felt a pang of sadness in his chest. This was where Emily had spent so many years of her life, and now it was abandoned, left behind like everything else. They parked the car and walked up to the front door. Michael's heart was pounding and his mind was racing. What were they going to find? Would anyone be there to help them? Or would they only uncover more secrets? Michael knocked on the door, his hand shaking slightly. He had no idea what to expect, but he knew this was the only way to get answers. As the door creaked open, Michael's heart skipped a beat. The person standing there was someone he hadn't seen in years. Emily's older brother, James. The door opened fully, and Michael stood there staring at the man he hadn't seen in nearly a decade. James, Emily's older brother, looked almost the same as Michael remembered. Tall, with sharp features and a seriousness that always seemed to match his reserved personality. He had a strong jawline and a stoic expression, his dark hair slightly graying at the temples, but there was something different about him now, something Michael couldn't quite place. James blinked a couple of times, his eyes narrowing as if trying to place the face in front of him. Then recognition hit and his expression softened just slightly. "Michael?" James asked in a quiet voice. "Is that really you?" Michael nodded, his throat tight. "It's been a long time." James stepped aside and waved Michael and Sarah into the house. Come in, come in. It's good to see you again. I didn't think I'd be seeing you here today." His voice carried a note of uncertainty, but Michael could tell that James was trying to remain polite. As they stepped inside, the house smelled faintly of wood and old books, just like it had when Michael had visited years ago. The living room looked almost the same, with the same old furniture and family photos on the walls. But there was an undeniable sense of emptiness in the air. It wasn't the warm, inviting atmosphere Michael remembered. The house felt hollow, as if the life that had once filled it was now gone. James motioned for them to sit on the couch, and they all settled in, the tension in the room thickening with every passing second. Michael couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. James didn't look like he wanted to talk, and there was a heaviness in his eyes that Michael hadn't noticed before. "James," Michael began, his voice steady but filled with the weight of all his unasked questions. "I need to know something. I need to understand what happened to Emily. Why did she disappear? Why didn't you or anyone else tell me anything?" James stiffened at the mention of Emily's name. His gaze dropped to the floor, and for a moment Michael thought he wouldn't answer. But after what felt like an eternity of silence, James sighed deeply and looked up at Michael, his face full of regret. "Michael, I don't know where to start," James said quietly. "You have to understand we didn't want you to get involved. We didn't want you to know the truth because there's nothing you could have done, nothing any of us could have done." Michael's heart started to race. He leaned forward, barely able to contain his urgency. "What do you mean? What happened? I'm not leaving until I know." James ran a hand through his hair and looked out the window, his expression distant. He seemed to be searching for the right words, struggling to find a way to explain something that had been buried for so long. "It wasn't an accident, Michael," James finally said. "Emily didn't die in that crash. She staged it. She faked her death." The words hit Michael like a punch to the gut. He felt his stomach churn, his mind spinning. "What? How? Why would she do that?" James shook his head, his voice barely a whisper. "There was a lot going on, Michael. A lot that none of us knew how to handle. Emily, she got mixed up with the wrong people. It started slowly, with little things she didn't tell anyone about. And then it spiraled out of control. There were threats, dangerous people, and she made a decision. She thought it was the only way to protect everyone, to protect you." Michael's chest tightened and his breath quickened. "What do you mean, protect me? What could be so dangerous that she had to disappear? Why didn't she tell me?" James looked at Michael, his eyes full of guilt. "She couldn't, Michael. She couldn't tell you because it wasn't safe. She had to disappear. You were the last person she wanted to hurt, but she thought it was the only way. She knew that if she stayed, the people after her would come after you too, and she couldn't live with that. So she faked her death, left everything behind, including you." Michael's mind was reeling. He felt like he was drowning in confusion and disbelief. "But how? How could she just leave me like that? How could she let me think she was dead?" James's gaze softened with sympathy. "She didn't want to, Michael. She didn't want to leave you. But she thought it was the only way. She thought you would be safer without her. She was wrong, though. She made the wrong choice. And now, after all this time, she wants to come back. But there's something you need to know. It's not over. The people she was running from, they're still out there." Michael's heart hammered in his chest. "What do you mean they're still out there? How do you know that?" James looked away again, clearly uncomfortable. "Because they came for me too," he said, his voice shaking with the weight of the confession. "After Emily disappeared, they started looking for her. They were furious. They blamed me for her leaving. They thought I knew more than I was telling them, and I didn't. But they didn't believe me." Michael's mind raced as the pieces began to fall into place. The letter from Emily, the sense of urgency in her words, the hidden truths. It all made sense now, but only in the most terrifying way. Emily had been in danger. She had been running from something, someone, and now that danger was still looming over her even after all these years. "James, where is she? Do you know where she is now?" Michael asked, his voice shaking with a mix of fear and hope. James looked at Michael, his expression a mixture of sorrow and regret. "I don't know, Michael. I haven't seen her in years. After she disappeared, I tried to find her, but it was like she vanished off the face of the earth. And the people who were after her, they kept searching. They never stopped." Michael felt a rush of frustration. "So what now? What do we do?" James stood up, pacing slowly across the room. "There's only one way to find out where she is. You need to go to the place where she disappeared. There's a cabin deep in the woods far away from the town. She went there to hide. I'm not sure if she's still there, but it's the last place she was. That's where you'll find the answers." Michael stood up, his body filled with a new determination. "I'm going there. I'll find her, no matter what." James nodded slowly, his eyes filled with a mixture of pride and fear. "Just be careful, Michael. There's a lot more at stake than you realize. If you find her, things won't be the same as they were before. Nothing ever is." Michael didn't care. He wasn't going to stop. He had to find Emily. He had to know the truth. The journey to the cabin was one of the longest and most challenging experiences Michael had ever faced. The road had been winding, narrow, and bumpy. He could barely keep his thoughts focused on the road ahead of him, as his mind kept drifting back to the conversation he'd had with James. The revelation that Emily had faked her death, had disappeared to protect him. None of it made sense. But Michael couldn't ignore the urgency in James's voice. He had to find Emily, and he had to do it now. It had been years since he'd even heard about this cabin. Emily had always talked about it in passing, a place she'd found years ago when she needed to get away from everything, a quiet place to think and recharge. Michael had never thought much about it then. It was just another one of those things that Emily had kept to herself, tucked away in the corners of her life. But now it seemed like it was the key to finding out the truth about everything that had happened to her. The landscape around him was quiet, almost eerie, as he drove deeper into the woods. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the trees. The world outside seemed to be holding its breath, as if it too was waiting for something to happen. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, the reality of what he was doing weighing on him with every passing mile. As the road grew narrower and more difficult to navigate, Michael slowed the car, his eyes scanning the thick trees around him. He had no idea what to expect when he reached the cabin. Would Emily still be there, or would he find something even more unsettling? The unknown was a constant companion, and no matter how much he tried to prepare himself, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The car finally bumped over a small hill, and there it was, just as James had described it. The cabin, nestled between two large pine trees, stood alone in the vast wilderness. It looked like something out of a painting, a small wooden structure with a stone chimney and a wraparound porch. From the outside it seemed peaceful, even welcoming, but Michael knew better now. He knew there was more to this cabin than met the eye. He parked the car just off the narrow dirt path and stepped out into the cool evening air. The wind rustled through the trees, sending a shiver down his spine. The sounds of the forest, the chirping of crickets, the whisper of leaves filled the air, but it all felt distant, unreal. Michael's heart pounded in his chest as he walked toward the cabin, his footsteps crunching on the dry leaves beneath him. Every step felt heavy, as if the earth itself was trying to hold him back. But he wasn't going to stop now. When he reached the porch, he hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do next. He wasn't even sure if anyone was inside. The cabin looked deserted with no signs of life. But the letter had been clear. This was where Emily had hidden herself all those years ago, and this was where he would find the answers. Taking a deep breath, Michael knocked on the door. At first there was nothing but silence. He knocked again, his pulse quickening. "Emily?" he called out softly. His voice sounded small, lost in the vastness of the wilderness. "It's me, Michael. I'm here to find you." There was no answer. He waited, but the silence stretched on, almost unbearably long. His heart sank. What if no one was here? What if Emily was gone for good? What if this entire journey had been for nothing? But just as he was about to turn away, a sound broke the stillness. The faint creak of a door opening. Michael's breath caught in his throat. He turned quickly, and there she was. Emily stood in the doorway, her face pale but unmistakably hers. Her dark hair had grown longer and she looked different, older somehow, but it was her. His heart leapt in his chest, but at the same time 1,000 emotions crashed over him. Relief, anger, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of disbelief. For a moment, neither of them moved. They just stood there, locked in a gaze that held all the years, all the pain, and all the questions that had lingered between them. Michael couldn't believe she was real. After everything, after all this time, there she was. But he had no idea what to say. Emily finally spoke, her voice soft and hesitant. "Michael, I didn't think you'd find me." Michael stepped forward, unable to hold back his emotions any longer. "I've been looking for you for years," he said, his voice raw. "You disappeared. You faked your death. You left me behind and you never said a word. Why, Emily? Why did you leave me like that?" Her eyes filled with tears and she looked away for a moment, struggling to find the right words. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to leave you. But I had no choice. I thought it would be safer for both of us." "Safer?" Michael repeated, his voice shaking with frustration. "How could leaving me be safer? I've been living with the pain of losing you for 10 years. And now you're telling me you were alive the whole time?" "I know," Emily said, her voice trembling. "I should have come back. I should have told you the truth. But the people who were after me..." She stopped, looking over her shoulder as if to make sure no one was listening. "They were dangerous. They were watching me. I couldn't risk it. I couldn't let them hurt you." Michael took a step closer, the weight of her words pressing down on him. "Who were they, Emily? Who were you running from?" She hesitated, her eyes darting around the cabin as though the answer was too dangerous to speak aloud. "It's a long story, Michael. One that I can't tell you all at once. But I promise it's over now. They won't come after me anymore." Michael could hardly believe what he was hearing. "How do you know that? How can you be sure they're gone?" Emily's face grew serious, and for the first time, Michael saw a glimpse of the woman he had once known, the strong, determined person who had never backed down from anything. "Because I've made sure they're gone," she said firmly. "I've done what I needed to do to keep you safe. But there are still things I can't talk about, not yet." Michael looked at her, his heart heavy with a mixture of relief and confusion. He wanted to ask more questions, to demand answers, but he could see the pain in her eyes. He could see that she wasn't ready to share everything with him, at least not yet. "I don't know what to say," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been living in the dark for so long, Emily. I didn't know if I would ever see you again, and now that you're here, I don't even know what comes next." Emily stepped toward him, reaching out to touch his arm. "I know, I never meant for it to be this way. But now that you're here, I want to try to make it right. I want to explain everything to you, but I need time. We need time. I've hurt you, Michael, and I don't expect you to forgive me right away." Michael looked into her eyes, seeing the sincerity there, and for the first time in years he felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't over. There was still a chance for them, even if everything wasn't perfect. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let her go again. He nodded slowly, his voice filled with determination. "We'll figure this out, Emily. Together." And for the first time in 10 years, Michael felt a sense of peace settle over him. The past was still there, lingering in the shadows, but the future was wide open. There were answers to be found and a new chapter to begin, one step at a time.